Hey there, and welcome to another edition of USRA Coalition's Let's Talk About It. I'm your host, Mike Coath, and remember, Let's Talk About It is geared towards drawing issues out of the darkness and into the light. We do so in the name of awareness and prevention. Just a reminder, Let's Talk About It is brought to you by the USRA Coalition. USRA Coalition is a partnership between the boroughs of Upper Saddle River and Allendale, New Jersey. Members consist of elected officials, parents, school administration, police, health professionals, local businesses, clergy, and members of local community organizations. The mission of the USRA Coalition is to educate and create awareness in our communities to prevent and reduce substance abuse and other health-related issues. And that brings us to today's guest. He's lucky to be here, and we're lucky to have him. And he is fortunate to be here because, like many who have traveled down the path he did, some are not so fortunate, and they are not with us. Jon Shaw is a recovering addict, and he agreed to come here and tell us his story of how he led to the road of recovery and is able to get back on his feet. And we're happy to have him. Jon, welcome to the program. How are you?
I'm very well. Thank you for having me.
So, Jon, you're not from the town, but you're from the area. Just trying to get to know you. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Where'd you grow up? A little about your family, some background info. Who is Jon Shaw?
Well, I grew up in Suffern. My mother's a teacher. My father worked in trucking when I was younger, and he suffered with alcoholism, and he's been sober now a little bit, over 20, almost 25 years actually. And I experienced some of that firsthand. He crashed a car with me in it when I was about 7. There was a lot of tumultuous stuff that went on early on in my childhood. Some other family issues that are a little more deeper to get into in a different time. But you do know my mother. She is an upstanding member of society. She's a great lady. But at that time, when we were younger, she was a young mother with 2 kids, 7 and 5, and she could have handled things differently. And growing up, we didn't want for much, but we weren't rich. A teacher and some father worked in trucking. And, we're average middle class family. And, the way I got into drugs and alcohol, the first time I ever, drank into drugs was actually both in the same year. And I was young. I was 10 years old. My older cousin, who was 5 years older than me, we were riding bikes down by his home in Clinton, New Jersey. And we stopped in the woods. He pulled out an Altoids container. He, opened it up. There was a couple of rolled joints in there. He asked me if I wanted to smoke. I said no. And what I actually said was, my mother said it's bad for me. And he said, if you don't smoke this with me, I'm going to leave you in the woods. And he said, I guess I'm smoking with you. And, from there, that same summer, like a couple of buddies of mine, I still have the same group of friends since I'm, in first grade. A lot of these guys I grew up with, I've been friends with, for, 25 plus years. And, we started stealing beers and stuff like that, from parents at parties and whatever, but, the real nature of the disease, like I didn't notice a dependence on drugs and alcohol until I was much older. And, I was a 3-sport athlete in high school, scored well on SATs, got into all 9 colleges I applied to, but my maturity level wasn't where it needed to be. I actually told my parents when it was time for me to go away to school, I was like, I don't think this is such a good idea. I think I should stay home at RCC. But my parents, knowing the environment that I created for myself at home, with my friends' use of substances and things like that, they were like, you're leaving, you're out of here. So I ended up getting kicked out of college in the middle of my 2nd semester for fighting and drugs and all that stuff. And, I moved out to Colorado after that, and, went out there with no real purpose. I had friends going to CU Boulder, and basically it was just, the young entrepreneur trafficking in narcotics and just trying to live a lifestyle that was conducive to somebody who didn't really know who he was. And every decision I made kind of brought me further away from a straight and narrow path, more towards criminal nature. And, I ended up, after Colorado, a bunch of people got arrested. We were transporting drugs across the country, and it was bigger than anything we expected it to be. And a couple of people got arrested. I ended up leaving the country. I lived in the Middle East for a good period of time. I came back home. I was home for a few weeks, decided, you know what, I need a geographical change. Maybe that'll change the path that I'm on. And I moved to Israel, actually. I lived in the Middle East for a while. At this point, I had a mohawk and a septum piercing. And, I was just, I was a wild animal for a long time. Drugs and alcohol were about having fun for a good while. And then it became something to numb pain when people started dying. The opioid epidemic was really just budding. It was really just spawning when I was in high school. So I tried OxyContin one time and I got so sick from it. I hated it. It wasn't for me. Opiates were never my thing. I was more involved with cocaine, Xanax, alcohol, pot. That was basically all at the same time, all the time. That was it. But I saw people dying when I was younger, and I always thought that was horrible. And my best friend passed away from a drug overdose when we were 23. He actually died 2 days after my 23rd birthday. And before that, another friend had passed away from cerebral meningitis, a very close friend. And after those two instances, drinking and drugs kind of stopped being about having fun. It was more of a crutch. I guess getting sober will be, some follow-up questions, but what led me to getting sober was really no choice of my own. It was almost forced upon me, but the decision was mine to make. I had the option. I had gotten arrested in January of 2016 on some serious charges, multiple felony charges that ended up having me entered into the felony drug court program in Rockland County. I could tell you all about that. That was 18-month long program with a 3-year probation period after, which I got off of an additional 18 months. But that path is not an easy path. A lot of people failed at that program and ended up going to prison. You sign away your right to appeal when you enter the drug court program. So if you violate it, they sentence you to whatever they want. And that's it. No early release. So I basically had an option of go to jail or get sober. And I think I made the right decision. So.
Well, I'd say that's the understatement of the year. That's some journey, John. That's unbelievable. So, to be a person walking in your shoes, listen, you just said you're a 10-year-old kid and someone forced you to have a joint in the woods, and then you're in drug court and you have a choice. You got people dying around you. You can go to jail or get sober. Like, you ever take the time to kind of reflect and think about how did I get to this point? Like how do you get there? Like, what steps are you taking where it kind of just all unravels to get to there?
The thing about your life unraveling around you is you're the last one to find out that it's completely unraveled. Most of the time, there's a certain level of denial or coping mechanisms that allow you to think that everything's going to be okay. Something will change on its own. I didn't think that the decisions I was making at the time, when you're, let's say from, after high school is really where the decision-making process was crash a car when I was 19 years old, get 23 staples in my head and, go out and go into the city the next day and go to a concert and get completely annihilated. It just there wasn't, I had a serious head trauma and I go out and get, totally wrecked in the city the following night with staples in my head. There's no balance of rational thought process. I didn't think anything was wrong with it. I was I'm 19 years old. I just survived a car accident. Let's go out in the city and celebrate. It was just the decision-making process for me was completely reckless in nature. I've been arrested over a dozen times for various things, fighting, drug sales, 4 DUI charges. I've only been convicted of 1. It's wild. It was really, really, when I talk about it, I reflect back and I remember instances that just completely escape me. And I think like, wow, I'm just lucky to be alive. And not even for, the sake of an overdose or something like that, but just from the decision-making processes that put me in so many risky situations.
Yeah, I bet. Well, listen, it doesn't take a rocket scientist or a brain surgeon to figure out when you're impaired for under the influence of anything, your decision making ability goes way down. So that being said, if there are kids out there or even adults out there who are, they're dabbling in this stuff and they're starting down that path, what would you tell them to prevent from getting to where you got to? Because like you said yourself, like you never thought anything was wrong around you.
You know, One example that I always like to use when I'm talking to younger people and even adults is when I ended up going to jail when I was arrested in January of 2016. There was a young man in there. His name is Tommy, and he, was just sitting in the cells. You're in a common area. You start talking to people. And he's like, "Oh, sign up, go to the AA meeting. You get out of the pod, you can go, whatever." And just get out of here for a bit. So I signed up. I went to the AA meeting with him, and that was the first AA meeting I had ever attended. Was in jail, and I sat with this kid, talked to him. I was only in there for 5 days before I was bailed out and everything. But I actually ended up taking a speaker's commitment for the jail meeting through my AA group. So every Wednesday I went to the Rockland County Jail, and who was in that jail when I'm 3 years sober, coming back to start that commitment? Same guy was in the jail for a different charge. And when I talked to him, it really all just came down to his decision making. He didn't change any of the behaviors that put him in there the first time. So a lot of the time when kids start using drugs and alcohol, or even adults, they don't think there's anything wrong until there's a consequence. You don't think there's anything wrong with drinking and driving until you get a DUI, or until, just you're lucky to get a DUI or you kill somebody. You don't think there's anything wrong with it. Everyone's doing it. It's not a big deal. And, I'm not going to sit here and demonize every substance. I think medical marijuana absolutely has its benefits to the world. It's just not going to work for me because it'll lead me to something else. But, people starting on that path of what they think may be innocent, you might want to try and talk to somebody because everybody knows somebody who's struggled with addiction in some way. If you think there's any chance that you're headed in a direction like that, adolescent, teenager or adult, there's always people you can reach out to talk to about, was this what it was like for you when you first started? Because this is kind of what it's like for me. I can't control how much I consume. Once I start consuming, there's really no end until I'm completely inebriated or passed out. There's signs for people who tend to, live in excess, that won't be able to handle substances. Like I grew up with guys who, smoked a joint, went to college, did their thing. They smoked pot all the time. They graduated in 4 years, have successful careers. They still smoke a little bit of pot here and there, have a drink on the weekend. It just doesn't make sense to me as a person who I truly believe addiction is, has a base in genetics where, a lot of people in my family are either in somewhere in addiction or in recovery. There really isn't much of a space between. So yeah, I'd say reach out to people who have been through it before. We're always happy to talk. That's why I'm here.
Yeah, right. So, yeah, listen. We all know about the chemical dependency that addiction can cause, and like no one wakes up and says like, "Yeah, I'm going to be an addict." Like things aren't. I got everything in control. I'm going to be fine. Like take us through the mindset of an addict. Take us through the psychological process. Is it denial? Is it invincibility? Like what is it that you just can't get through to that person? And like looking back, if someone had said those things you just said to us, would that have helped?
You
Did
know
you wish
what?
you had someone like that in your life?
As a young person, with what my personal mindset was at that time, I had gotten arrested when I was 18 and went to a rehab for 28 days just to get charges reduced, and that was my thought process. I'll go to this rehab. My parents are going to pay for it. I'll tell them I want to stop doing what I'm doing, and these charges will get dropped. We're manipulative. We manipulate to get what we want. And speaking as someone who was stuck in addiction without knowing they were really a drug addict, the first time I ever experienced withdrawal symptoms was in a jail cell. I thought I had food poisoning. I was so in denial that I didn't even realize that I was going through an alcohol withdrawal. I thought I had food. So, you don't, people who are in addiction, like especially, when you see all these people around you who are addicted to, say, opiates or something that literally creates a physical dependence, and you just like to do other things, like I was able to separate myself, and I'm not some, dirtbag junkie. I mean, I'm just partying. I'm having fun. I'm making money. I'm having a good time. I'm hanging out with girls. I'm traveling. I was still traveling, doing my fun stuff. Like when you get trapped in that opiate bubble where your only real trip you make is to go to the drug dealer and you go home. Like when you, like in my mind, it was like, oh, doing, Molly, I'm, doing blow. Like I can travel. I'm having fun. I meet people. Like, I didn't feel like a drug addict. It's an illusion that you create for yourself that can be really dangerous.
When you are in that world, the people around you, family, loved ones, like you said, you're a regular guy. You're a regular guy. Yeah, you had a intact family system. Okay, you had your fair share of issues, but who doesn't? Do you listen to any of those people? Are you shutting yourself out? Are you in your own world? Like, what are for the people on the other side of the family? What are they looking for? What are they going to see out of someone who they might think might be in trouble? What are some red flags?
Well, obvious red flags would be, theft. As a young person would be, stealing from parents, pawning items, things like that. But, just seclusion, change in friend group. In high school, I had my core group of friends that I grew up with, but I would bounce around from different friend groups, experimenting with different kinds of, behaviors and stuff like that. And it's really hard to pick up, like, because nobody wants to see it in their own child. So for parents, I would say a lot of the time, most kids are friends with kids through sports or other activities. And, for parents to work together and to say, hey, keep an eye on my kid, I'll keep an eye on your kid. If I notice things that are out of the ordinary or change in behavior, I will let you know as soon as I can. And it's out of the kindness of my heart, and you shouldn't take offense to it.
And what about kids? Kids should watch out for other friends too, because parents, they don't know anything.
Absolutely. It's a really hard road for kids to navigate. And I'll give you a perfect example. When we were in 8th grade, some friends of mine and I actually wasn't at the actual event. We were smoking pot when we could, whatever. And, a couple of my friends and a few girls who we hung out with, were smoking weed. And one of the girls went and told her mother, and, the mother let all the other parents know, and it was a whole big thing. And we had like a meeting in school. They brought like the high school, like the peer leadership group to the middle school to talk to the high school kids. And this girl was shocked. Like, I mean, it was a very negative experience for her. For the next, few weeks, she basically had to find an entire new friend group. And to be completely honest, it worked out for her for the best. But, she's a very successful person at this point. And, for kids to want to step up and say something that could jeopardize their social standing within their groups is a really hard thing to ask. So, obviously, when you're dealing with that kind of stuff, like one thing that I've noticed working with young people is that anonymous surveys work pretty well. And you could kind of get a feel, like, you do an anonymous survey with a class of young people and say, hey, does your group of friends involve themselves with this, this, and this? And you look back and you know who took the survey, and you can kind of figure it out of what, like, you can target, certain people to figure out what you're trying to look for. But with adults, I feel like, parents need to work together in a lot of different ways to notice things, because nobody wants to see negative things in their own child. They tend to kind of avoid seeing them, to be honest. I can give you a great example as well. My friend Phil, he passed away in 2011 or 2012. It was close to that time period. And a friend of mine and I were worried about his drug use. We had noticed that he sold a chain that was given to him by his grandfather. He had sold a watch that was given to him. And we went and spoke to his mother. And his mother actually said, she's like, all of you guys are effing drug addicts. How are you going to come here and tell me that he needs help and you don't? And I sat there and thought, I probably need help too, but I'm not doing anything that's going to kill me. And I was doing plenty of stuff that could have killed me. But, when we brought that to her attention, just a few months before he passed away from a drug overdose. And her reaction was to rebuke us instead of say, okay, maybe they have some issues too, but they're the people who are around him all the time. Maybe I should get on board with it. That was a thing that really took me back, especially when he passed away, because we went to his house after he passed away. And his mother actually said the first thing she said to me, she came outside and said, I just didn't see this coming. And in my mind, I'm like, we told you it was coming, plain as day. But, people just don't want to accept negative things about their child when they hear it.
It's a shame. That's an unfortunate experience.
Yeah.
Listen, you've had a number of them. Your road is long traveled. You're lucky to be here. But since you went to drug court and you're sober now, you are trying to pay it forward. Tell us about some of the other groups that you're working with. Tell us about some of the groups that you are trying to get back to and create awareness in hopes of prevention.
Well, just after I came home from, I went to a rehab after I got arrested, and, I kind of got sober by accident. I was trying to manipulate my way through there as drug addicts do. Like, what's the fastest way I can get out of this? And I got involved with a good group of guys up there in Connecticut, and I was really taught the right way to get sober, by doing service as much as you can to help out other people. And I left that rehab in July, and I came home and I went to a local group in Rockland County, New York. It's a men's group. My recovery personally works better for me in a room full of men, and as opposed to mixed meetings. It's just personally for me, the focus is different. It's more geared towards, guy stuff. But I got involved in that group immediately, and I took some commitments that involved outreach, where I chaired a meeting at the Blaisdell Recovery Center in Orangeburg, New York, for about 2.5 years. Every Tuesday night, we brought a meeting in, speaker meeting into the guys in the inpatient rehab there. And I also took the Rockland County Jail commitment, and I held that also for about 2.5 years. Bringing a meeting into the jail every Wednesday night, talking to guys who are in the same position that I was in. And, I do, my family owns a company that helps provide services to different counties. They acquire and manage state and federal grants for alcohol, substance abuse, and that kind of stuff. And I'll do speaking events for them, and, sit on panels, and, the guy in recovery, the questions to be answered about that. Basically, the greatest rewards come from the smallest acts. Doing those big service things where you have a commitment is one thing, but just seeing a new guy who's struggling coming in and not knowing exactly what to do, or somebody who had some time who messed up, and reaching out to them and just offering your hand and any advice and being available is really the greatest service in my mind. The bigger things, it's great to do, and it's very rewarding personally, and it keeps you in a good frame of mind. But keeping it all small, keeping it tight, and being on top of the smaller things is really the most rewarding for me personally. I try and get out in the community and do as much as I can, but a lot of this stuff is anonymous, as you say. And this kind of stuff really, it puts you out there. Anyone who sees this could see me and say, oh, that guy's in recovery. And to me personally, that doesn't matter, because my story is most helpful when it's out there personally. Like, for me, I feel like I'd rather have everybody know so they can come to me. A lot of people don't want to be in this position.
Yeah. Well, we can understand why based on what you described, but it's really noble of you to go on a limb and come out and tell us. And you know what they say, reputations they're built in drops over time, and they're lost in buckets. It sounds like you emptied the bucket a couple times, but it's full again. So listen, thanks for being here. Your reputation's back up there. Listen, we're going to shift gears a little bit. We're coming to the close of the program. You want to play a little 1st and 10? We'll shift gears. It's a little more lighthearted questions.
Sure, go ahead.
All right, so listen, you got 4 downs to score. 1st and goal. We're going to punch it in. We're going to go one at a time. Let's try and move the ball down. Let's try to score it. Let's go. Let's punch it in. Here we go. 1st and 10. 1st and 10. Listen, what do you do to unwind? What do you do to relax these days?
Well, this 2020 has been one of the best years of my life, to be completely honest. And I say that with the utmost, empathy to everyone who struggled this year. But I got the first, I spent the first 4 years of recovery working extremely hard at myself personally, graduating college, doing all the things I needed to do. But this year I got to play golf almost every single day. I hike with my dogs every morning in the woods behind my house. I mean, I bought a piece of property that abuts Harriman State Park. I have 47,000 acres of trails. So I unwind in the morning when I wake up with a, about 2 to 3 mile hike, and then I go play golf. And it's just been absolutely fantastic this year. I couldn't have asked for anything else.
Well, years ago, people were telling you to take a hike, probably had a different connotation. So that's good. All right. Listen, that's a pretty good answer. Way to make lemonade out of lemons. All right. Second down. We're moving closer. You got a favorite New Year's resolution? You a big believer in that?
I was never really a New Year's resolution guy because, to be completely honest, in active addiction, you don't have that much to look forward to. And my resolution was never to get sober. But no, I was never really a resolution guy. I'm more of a long-term goal oriented, small steps, but long-term goal. I've just always kind of motored forward through things, but never really put like any kind of connotation on a New Year's resolution.
All right. We'll say no gain on that one. Fair enough. No problem. Hey, listen, it's for some, not for others. Myself, again, rather be consistent over time, consistency over time than intensity in the short term. So not much for that myself. Listen, you've done some pretty extraordinary things in the journey that you've taken and to where you are now. You're very lucky, you're very fortunate, extraordinary story. If you were a superhero, who would you be?
Who would I be as a superhero? Oh, man. Sitting here thinking Tiger Woods, but he's not a superhero.
He's not a superhero.
I mean, I never really cared for superheroes. I always looked up to guys who knew who they were on the inside, just being true to yourself, not trying to, be somebody who you're not, the people who out there being loud, bolsterous type people. I always kind of look down on that. I've always just respected guys like my father who keep a small circle, and do the things he loves. I don't know. I never really I don't want to be a superhero. I just want to do right by my family and friends and, live a quiet, nice life. I don't know.
Oh man, that's a great answer. You got bonus points there. I don't know. You're on the inches of the goal line. It's a great answer. I mean, I'd like to be Superman though. Laser vision flying, that's pretty cool though.
Yeah, that won't bother any of
Just me. I'm not Superman by any means. All good. But that's a nice segue to our last question. Listen, it's 4th and goal. You can kick or stick. You want to put one through the uprights and call it quits, or do you just want to punch it in the end zone? Answer this last question.
I'm going for the score.
All right, cool. So you talked about the profile of who you admire, but if you were able to have dinner with anyone, any person in the history of the world, sit down and break bread, who would it be?
Any person in the world, living or dead. Maybe Churchill.
Oh, wow. That's a terrific pick. That's great. Why Churchill? Aside from the obvious.
Well, from somebody who struggled with addiction himself, with alcohol and other stuff, he had kind of a, uphill battle to achieve everything that he did. Some of his personal views of the world may be viewed as inappropriate in this day and age, but he didn't have an easy path to get to where he got to, and he's one of the leaders of the world.
And a pillar of resilience. Saw England through their darkest hour, made it their finest. That's a great book. That's awesome. Jon, thanks so much for coming here. Thanks for sharing your story. We hope to have you again in the future. And we know that addiction is a daily battle. So make sure you go out there and win the day every day.
Thank you very much
for being here, Jon.
Take care.
All right. That's all the time we have. Again, it's USRA Coalition's Let's Talk About It. We bring these issues out of the darkness and into the light. And listen, sometimes, as hyper-connected as we are these days, sometimes it's best to go old school. Pull up a chair, sit at the table. Because remember, if you're not at the table, you could be on the menu. Take care, everyone. We'll see you next time.